Okay.
All right, well, I will officially call the meeting to order and we'll get into announcements. The two announcements we have are pertaining to checks over $25,000. The first one is Schultz Ford Lincoln Mercury, which was the amount of $36,895 for a 2021 Ford Explorer for IPD. That was from the general fund. And the second one is RVP Flooring Systems for the library carpeting out of the capital budget for $82,789.18. And Pacific Trans Global Construction Corp for the library mold and water repairs from the library fund and the capital fund the total was $39,611 and approximately $11,500 of that were reimbursed by insurance. I do think that Pacific Trans Global Construction Corp is one of my favorite counterparties we have. It always feels like some giant global conglomerate. The fact that they're like cleaning up the floor in the library kind of, it doesn't quite seem so, trans global, but what do I know?
They're based in Hastings.
Yeah, but we did send them a check anyway.
Yeah, no, they're very, very good.
I don't know if anybody else has any announcements. Otherwise, we'll go into correspondence. All right. We have several pieces of correspondence. Most of it is related to the public hearing. I think there's actually only one that's not, which is from Chet Kerr, which is designation of the area surrounding Halsey Pond as parkland. It's a very well-researched letter. I think you can get the gist of it if I actually read the first paragraph. On behalf of the Greater Irvington Land Trust and the Open Space Advisory Committee, we are writing to request that the Village of Irvington formally dedicate as public parkland the village-owned property on the southern and western boundary of Halsey Pond. This 16.79 acre parcel is Town of Greenberg tax parcel number 2191867, the dedicated village open space. Everyone can feel free to read the rest of the letter, but it kind of just basically gives, the history of the property and kind of rationale on why we should consider making it parkland. So we will take that under consideration, and I thank Gilt and the Open Space Committee and Chet obviously for their well thought out letter. Thanks for that.
I'd love to see a further discussion on this. I'm sure we will.
Yeah.
Sounds very interesting.
Yeah, maybe even the next work session or something we can talk about it. It doesn't seem super controversial to me, but so.
No, it's certainly an area I already thought was included, and I'm glad that they brought it to our attention that it's not. So.
Yep. The next 4 pieces of correspondence are actually all part of the public hearing. So I will just acknowledge them now, and that way if someone would rather speak rather than having me speed read their letter, I will defer to that till later. So we will now move on to public comments on anything that's not on the agenda. So I guess really the main things on the agenda are the public hearing, but I guess any other topics that anybody has at this time. Click over to attendees. Why don't I move on to the consent agenda in case someone's figuring out how to raise their hand. Anyone have questions on the consent agenda? Otherwise, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, now we'll get into the continuation of a public hearing to consider a local law amending the Irvington zoning code to create the multifamily office district. Marianne, did you have anything you wanted to update us on?
Yeah, I should. There's some changes since the last draft. It's kind of funny. Hard to remember which was the last thing presented in public, but presented at the public meeting. And I guess it wasn't actually that long ago. We presented the one that had the bonus for moderate income housing. So this one, the new draft has two big sets of changes. I mean, not huge sets, but one, and I'll go through them in more detail in a couple minutes. One is our provisions related to senior housing, and then the other are modifications to the moderate income bonus, and including the possibility of permitting additional coverage or FAR in addition to the density bonus. And it also changes the definition of moderate income. So I guess the best way to go through it is from the top. On the first page, there's a definition added of senior citizen housing because then there's a new use permitted. It's age restricted, 3 or more family dwellings occupied by at least one adult age 62 and over. Senior citizen housing does not offer additional services to residents such as medical care, personal assistance, or meals. So what it would be is apartments, but apartments for people over 62 and over. And then that would be a separate use from 3 or more family dwellings. Also, I just want to point out on the second page on the use 3 or 4 more family dwellings, I crossed out the language that said provided that the maximum number of units shall be determined based on a site capacity analysis. That doesn't mean that's not how it's done. Other provisions of the code say that it has to be done that way. And this is to make it parallel to the multifamily district where it just says 3 or more family dwellings. If you put it here and not there, then it might look like 3 or more family dwellings there aren't subject to site capacity. So that's just taken out. There's not a substantive change. Then a use is added, senior citizen housing, as I defined it before, subject to the following conditions. 1, that all dwelling units shall be occupied by at least one adult age 62 or older. Any senior citizen housing unit shall be the primary residence of the senior citizen. Rental senior citizen housing units shall be rented by written lease and only the natural persons. The leases should and renewals can't exceed 2 years. Sublets or assignments aren't allowed. And as long as the tenant remains eligible and must comply with the terms of the lease, the tenant shall be offered a 2-year renewal of the lease. Those are for purchase, senior citizen units must be initially sold and resold only to a person age 62 or older. And then there's a provision that there has to be a deed restriction running with the land that imposes these limitations. And then there's a provision that the Board of Trustees shall administer. This provision makes sure that people are the right age or they can hire somebody to do it. There's a small issue at some point the board should discuss is what you want to do if somebody over 62 passes away. So somebody could move in who's 70 and has a 50-year-old, 50-year-old wife, let's say, or husband. And if the 70-year-old dies, should the 50-year-old be able to stay? I think you should think about that a little bit, and we should deal with that specifically. I know that's often been a big problem in city leases in the city. So anyway, okay. Then the only other, there's actually 2 other changes. I'm going in the order it's in here, but let me just say what the other 2 changes are about senior citizens. One is the parking requirement. Instead of being you have to have 1.5 parking spaces per unit. It's only 1 space per unit for the senior citizen housing. And then the other thing is that the density factor for senior citizens is 2,000 rather than 3,000, which means that you could have 50% more senior citizen units in a building if it's a senior citizen building. The thinking there being that you don't get any bonus, you don't get to make the building any bigger. It's just you could have 50% more apartments in it, and it seemed that would not have wouldn't have negative impacts, certainly wouldn't have negative impacts on the schools or most likely on traffic.
Can I ask for one clarification?
Yeah.
The different density requirement for senior housing, that's applied to an entire building, is that correct?
Yes.
I mean, you can't say half the building is senior and half is something else and have a weird density factor then, can you?
No. But maybe, I don't know, maybe we should, maybe there should be something that indicates that it has to be a whole building. But wait a minute, I don't know. Might there be a situation where they're going to build more than 2 buildings and one is senior citizen and one not? So well, I suppose it's conceivable that somebody could have a big enough piece of property and they're building one age restricted and one non-age restricted. So then in that event, the density factor would all apply only to the one that's non-age restricted. Usually what or only to the age restricted one. I don't envision that as a big problem, because somebody who's going to build a building aimed towards seniors is going to make the whole building because of the things you're going to have to do. You're going to have, you know, probably ramps and, you know, other and maybe different amenities than you would. But
Well, I assume, but what happens if you have, like, for want of an argument, 2 floors being senior and the top floor being penthouse type of thing, you know, like being more extensive and expensive.
yeah, but generally, you've got like one use in a on a site, but let me, that's something I could, you know, look into. And I mean, I assume the intent is that you would only want senior citizen housing. If you would want a building to only have senior housing.
I mean, it makes sense, but I don't know if that's what reality says based on other
I
development.
have to tell you, I have never seen a building that's mixed senior and non-senior. You know, it probably for other, but anyway, we could look and make sure. And then, okay, so that's it. There are changes further in, but I covered them too. Okay, then the next issue is on page 5, where there's a provision that the Board of Trustees in its discretion can permit additional building coverage of up to 5% for buildings that include moderate income units. We talked about moderate income units before, and the point was raised, okay, you're letting us have more units, but that's not really going to work unless you let the building be bigger. So this allows, in the board's discretion, a 5% additional building coverage. One thing I think the Board of Trustees needs to discuss is whether they want this bonus to just be as of right. You build a moderate, you get the extra 5%, or whether you think it needs to be approved, the extra 5%, and if you think it does need to approve, whether you want it, that approval done by the Board of Trustees or the Planning Board. Remember, these are all going to be special permit uses, and the special permits granted by the Planning Board.
Well, all the other FAR expansions are determined by the Board of Trustees, correct?
I think that's the way it's drafted.
But what would be a situation where a builder would want to build moderate income housing according to our zoning, and we wouldn't give approval? In other words, why not make it as of right? What would a situation be that we would withhold approval when they would say that they were going to follow all the rules?
I don't know, maybe you look at it and think it's too big. I don't know. I mean, I think well, that's up for you guys to decide.
Well,
I wasn't only asking
Larry,
you,
it's a
I was
good
asking
point.
everyone. Right?
Pardon?
I said I wasn't only asking you, I was asking everyone.
Oh, everybody. Yeah, I'm sorry, Larry. Yeah, I think
No, you
So-
too.
Larry, one of the things that I was mentioned, I think last time during the work session, but I still am noodling about because I don't know what it really means or implies, is that we could go up to a 25% building coverage, but we still have the lot coverage nailed to 30%. So it seems very strange to me that that's the case, because if you're going to add more units, you're going to need more parking, and lot coverage is effectively driveways, walkways, and parking spaces.
Yeah,
So-
well, you'll need a few more, but you're not gonna need an extra 5%. I mean, because a lot of that coverage is there, for the walkways, the parkways. That's not gonna change because you've got, 6 more units. You're right, the parking spaces may. But I don't know if you want to increase overall coverage. If you did,
Well,
it should
I'm not saying
be like 1%.
I would prefer not to, of course, because the more impervious surface, the more environmental issues there are. But I would just wanted us to think about it, and I think you're right that it's probably, you're talking about just a handful of parking spaces.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's not, yeah, because originally I was thinking one might make increase them both by 5%. But then I thought, well, you don't need 5% more just for a couple more parking spaces. So, all
I
right,
think you're right on that.
okay. All right, then. And then there's the question, although of whether we want to increase the maximum FAR as Maxon has requested. My suggestion on that is, well, obviously we'll hear from people at the public hearing, but let's wait until they wrote late this afternoon saying that they'd like to submit something for the February 1st meeting. So let's wait to see what they have to say on that. We can put, I would say you could put off that discussion. And then there's a parallel provision about increasing FAR if you've got your density bonus, that you could also increase FAR. And what those numbers should be partly depends on what the baseline FAR is. All right, then.
Hold on, you mean if we have the moderate income density bonus, then you can increase your FAR. That's what you're saying.
Yes. Essentially the same, it's essentially the same provision as the coverage thing. Remembering that there's really there's 4 properties in the district. 2 of them are built out. So whatever numbers you come up with there don't mean anything because they're built out. But the other 2, the Maxon site and the former Carafiello site, one of them is limited by coverage. The other one is limited by FAR. So you have to account for both of them. All right.
I guess one of my concerns also, because I know it's something to look back again. I'll have to look back at the diagrams that we got last week, but I'd be very concerned about enabling such a large FAR that it still can't fit into the required number of stories requirements. You know what I mean? I don't think we can't, we're not excusing.
That was the point of the drawings. And I think if you look at the drawings, you can see what it would be maxed out. Again, on the FAR, it's really only relevant to the Maxon site.
Right.
Because the other site can't get close to maximum FAR because of the limitation on coverage. All right, then the next set of changes start on page 16 with the provision for moderate income housing. This is something else the board should think about. As it's written, this would apply anywhere in the village. This would apply to multifamily elsewhere in the village because it's kind of parallel to the affordable housing thing. If you want it to only apply in the North Broadway district, it's easy to make that change. Just let me know that's how you want to do it. I think it probably makes sense. Anywhere in the village, although my guess is there's not going to be a lot more multifamily going up, in the village. But if it were to, for some reason, this would apply there. Was the board thinking that they would want this to apply to any multifamily?
Just remind me one more time. places like Richmond Hill, they're not considered multifamily, right? Or are they?
Well, they were developed as cluster housing, yeah. I
So
think they
that's
were
not an
developed
MF
as single
zone then.
family. Pardon?
That's not an MF zone. So
No,
we're
it's
talking
not an
about
MF
40
zone.
South Broadway and 20 and 40 North Broadway and Cedar Hill. Are those all
Yeah,
multifamily?
and those are multifamily, yeah.
And
And Half Moon.
Half Moon North and South, yeah. So you'd really have to see those developments do some tear down and rebuild before they could make use of any of this, most likely.
Yes, and the thing is, the impacts there wouldn't be that big because remember, they have a much high, they're not gonna tear down because if they did, they could only go up to half as many units as they have now because the density factor elsewhere in the village is 5,000. It's almost twice what it is here.
So I guess, we have to take your legal perspective, but I don't see the benefit of extending it beyond where it's actually possible in terms of zone definition. I mean, why not just isolate it to the North Broadway area if that's really the only area that's reasonable in the village that it would ever occur?
Yeah, that makes sense to me, Mark, too.
Okay. The rest of the board agree with that?
Yeah, I don't have a real strong feeling either way, so.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I guess in the future, someone could come in and say they want to tear down 40 South Broadway and rebuild it, and they'd like us to extend the zone definition for, but that would be a proactive request at that point.
Okay.
Does it make it more difficult on the edit? That's the question.
Yeah, it's a little trickier, but I can do it. All right. Then okay, we did make some changes in that article. And that is that well, first, moderate income household was the definition was changed to anybody with an income of not a household with an income of not more than 120% of AMI. We went up as high as 150 before, we dropped it to 120. And then in deciding which house, when the bonus would what you needed to provide to get the bonus, were distinguished here between for purchase dwellings and for rental dwelling units. And a for purchase dwelling unit that's affordable to a household whose income does not exceed 120% of AMI would qualify as moderate income. And for the rental, it's a unit that's affordable to a household whose income doesn't exceed 100% of AMI. We were kind of open to whether it should be 80%, but I think we were waiting to hear more from the housing committee on whether it was doable, whether at 80% it's going to attract developers to want to do it, because if they're not going to attract them to do it, there's no point putting the bonus in. So that's an open question.
Well, I mean, they can't pick a range. I mean, they can't come back and say, we don't want to do 80, we'll do 100.
Well, they could, yeah.
So what is the downside of?
Oh, no, maybe not. No, if we say it's got to be affordable to 80%, they can't come in and make it affordable to 100% AMI. So it is a big difference.
Yeah, I just feel like there's a big gap there, because when you look at true affordable housing with the big A, isn't the rental window at 60% and the ownership at 80?
Yes.
So we have a gap between 80 and 100 where we are not addressing anyone at this point.
Yeah, we talked about that quite a bit before, I thought.
Well, I do think what we're missing is some real feedback from additional feedback from some developers who could tell us just if these numbers are sane or not.
Yeah, I think we'll get it. At the work session, Tom Thacker said he had a developer who would be, willing to take a look at it. And I sent him the law and he spoke with him. Maybe we'll hear from Tom, but I don't know whether the developer got back to him. But it would be useful to have another set of eyes on it.
I mean, I
Right.
prefer to open, to close that gap if possible, but if it doesn't make financial sense from a developer's point of view,
Yeah, well, so that we're waiting on that. I
By the way, I don't
also,
think, excuse me, I don't think, to Mark's point, I don't think there's a big enough, that there's a big as gap as you think there might be, because, if someone were making 90% of AMI, it may be that they can still afford a unit that's priced for someone at 100 AMI, you know what I mean? So at that point, you're talking about an affordability question, and that's not a real hard line in the sand,
yeah, because their percentage of your income is actually pretty low. It's
There's wiggle room and a little bit.
yeah,
lower.
it can't be, I think it's either 30 or 33%. And, there's plenty of people who spend more than 33% for their housing costs. All right, and then,
especially if they don't have kids.
Oh, yeah, I mean, there's other factors is the point, and that's why there's some wiggle room there.
all right, then it specifies that the density bonus is not available in senior citizen housing. Because otherwise they would get way too big. And
Hold it for
What?
a second. So there's no income constraint on senior housing?
no,
It's just an age
well,
constraint.
you're gonna have to put the affordable units in it. 10% of them will have to be affordable.
Right, understood.
All right. Then the another thing I think the board has to think about is whether when you're calculating, and I haven't written this in one way or the other, when you're calculating how many affordable units there has to be, do you include the bonus ones? So if you were going to do, by right, you could have a 60 apartments. So your affordable requirement is 6, and you want to take advantage of the density bonus, so you go up to 72. Then in that event, do you have to provide, instead of 6 affordable, do you have to provide, I think it would be 8 affordable, because it says at least, it has to be at least 10% have to be. So if you've got 72 units, 7 units is not quite 10%, so it would have to be 8 units. So I don't know if you want to the bonus to require that to be counted in deciding how many affordables you have to be provided. The way it's written now, I think you would. Not the way it's written in here, but the way it's written in the affordable housing section says 10% of all units have to be affordable. So we have to, if you in fact didn't want to make that affordable requirement apply to the bonus units, we'd have to specify that. Do you want to think about it, or do people have feelings about that?
Why don't we leave it as it is right now and then listen to the developers' feedback?
Okay.
And I think if our goal is to have a big A affordable housing, and we're increasing the number of units, it only makes sense that the big A affordable housing should go up. I mean, does anyone else have comment? Am I just being overly ambitious and optimistic?
It seems logical, but I'm thinking, what am I missing in this formula? I'm not But yeah, like we said,
Well, I know what you're missing. You're missing is, somebody comes in, they have this project, you say, we're giving you a bonus. Yeah, we're giving you a bonus, but we're taking,
taking some of it away and then,
Yeah.
no, I don't want to do it.
But you could look at it another way, and it's
So let's go to the 72 one, okay? You've got 60, they're gonna take the bonus to 72. So you sit under, the way it is now, they have to provide 8 affordable. So does that mean then instead of 3 market rate and 3 moderate income, they would be providing 2 moderate income, 2 market rate, and 2
Too
affordable?
affordable.
So it really sort of,
on the other hand, it's a
I'm sorry, Mark, because you said the goal here is to create more affordable, but that was not the goal in the moderate income bonus.
No, I understand that, but it's the goal of the village overall.
Income.
What I've been trying to say, it's the goal and the philosophy of the village overall, and has been for the last number of years since we've passed and modified the big A affordable housing. So I don't know how that goal changes.
Well, it seems like the secondary goal that we're discussing now, not that it's less important, is for these moderate income units. So there are 2 goals now. It doesn't undo the first one, but it just adds another one.
Well, again, I'd be curious to hear numbers from other developers. I think this, also goes back to that same argument about whether this is something that's feasible for someone to develop. And if we hear that the 80 to 100% is feasible, then perhaps, requiring the other affordables becomes a little more reasonable. If we hear that it's not, that's an argument that requiring more affordables may not be feasible, just like we're not making an argument to change, 10% to 20% of affordables, like perhaps some other communities, have done. We don't think that's feasible, here. So I think the more input that we can get, and I know Tom had written that he had reached out. I don't know if he's heard yet or not from the Tarrytown people.
Yeah, okay. So that's an open question we'll have to get back to. So it'll stay yellow.
Stay yellow.
So that's it. That's it, Brian.
Okay. Anyone else from the board have anything they want to talk about, or we can just open it up for comment?
Oh, Brian, actually, not on this, but on the letter, because you didn't read the letter. There's just in the letter that we got from several of the neighbors, the long letter, there's just one thing in there I want to correct. I mean, there's a lot of policy arguments that are there for you, but when I was reading it, I was a little bit thrown when by the paragraph that said that the density is a way greater here than it is in Half Moon Woodbrook Gardens and Cedar Hill. And the numbers they were using didn't match up with my numbers and the numbers that, we hadn't talked about units per acre, but we talked about size, square footage, lot square footage per unit. We did it a slightly different way, but you come to roughly the same conclusion. And so then I looked at the numbers that were used in the chart in this letter, and those numbers were based on gross lot area. That exhibit B is based on gross lot area, when you're just determining density, the site capacity, it's based on net buildable site area, which means that the area there when you subtract the steep slopes or whatever other things. So that actually the numbers that I had given you previously were correct, and these are off. There's not there's not a difference in density. They're in the same ballpark.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't read the letter. I kind of did a quick scan of the attendees, and I saw Peter Budieri, a couple of other signatories were on it. So I thought they might want to present it rather than have me read it. But I appreciate that correction, Mary Ann. Anyone else? Otherwise, I will open it up. See who would like to talk. I know we have a couple people who said they wanted to talk already.
We have 2 comments in the chat.
Yeah. So I don't know, Michael Hanna, you put some comments in. Did you want to open up the discussion? Just raise your hand and Larry will move you over.
Yeah, hi. Just checking if you can hear me.
Yep.
Great. I do want to continue again to thank you for the work that you're doing as the board and the village to move forward on this rezoning initiative. And I think, it's taken a turn since I was able to watch a portion of the prior, I guess, work session, so that, this introduction of the senior housing is a new aspect. But, prior to that, I think that you're really on the right track, and that the conversation that you're having about adjusting the AMI possibly lower to 8,100. And I think you're absolutely right to go out and get, the feedback from several, developers to see if that's appropriate. I have heard from other sources that that's the case, and I think that would be a great outcome if you make that adjustment. I do think there's an aspect in as Mr. Gilliland was saying about trying to increase the economic and racial diversity of our community by having more different types of housing available. So I think this is on the right track. Obviously, if there's an opportunity to bring in, more substantive developers, subsidized developers to build affordable housing, that would be a very interesting and appealing prospect. But I am concerned that the senior housing provision could undermine. It sounds very complicated. It sounds like you wouldn't want to try and police this in terms of the provisions that you would have. And I would also say that, in trying to be a more welcoming, inclusive, diverse community, that the senior housing provision would limit that. And so someone who's, have children in the school, one aspect that as a resident and a parent is that I'd like to see our schools be increasingly represented by an economic and racially diverse student body. And so for that reason, I'm not excited to hear about the senior housing provision. So I think you're basically on the right track. I really commend you. And I would ask that, you consider lowering the AMI based on the feedback that you can get from a number of developers, and that you perhaps consider foregoing this senior housing provision. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I believe Joy Gowdy has her hand up. I believe she's one of the signatories, so I don't know if she wants to talk about the letter or anything else. Joy, you're up next.
I want to address something from what the last speaker said. I'm a little confused. New York State just enacted fair housing laws. Fair housing laws are pretty adamant about race. So I don't understand why people think they can steer race in this community. Do people think only Black people are poor? Is that what I'm hearing? Because that's a violation of New York State fair housing laws that were just enacted. What are we talking about when we're talking about all this housing? Are we talking about violating New York State fair housing laws? People don't seem to understand. You can't, if somebody's 80%, if that's your guideline, you can't discriminate against them under New York state laws. And I'm very confused about what people are talking about here. Are they not aware that you can't pick and choose who you want to live in houses? That's discrimination, folks. And so we better think about this. If the reason we're doing this is to discriminate, I, for one, will be right there in court, because New York State is very adamant. Every real estate agent in this community knows that we have to give New York State fair housing to every person who comes and looks at something in our community. So stop talking about diversity like you're going to steer a certain group of people here.
But I can't speak for the public, but I can speak for our board. We're aware of the rules, and we're talking about economic diversity, not any other kind of diversity. Joy's, I don't know if she was done, but she's muted. Deborah Flock has her hand up.
Hi there.
Hello.
So speaking to both Michael and Joy's comments, I'm speaking on behalf of the Housing Committee tonight. And we have taken a second and closer look at the housing needs assessment that was completed by the county last year, 2 years ago at this point, I guess. So the county commissioned a housing needs assessment that began in 2017 and concluded in November of 2019. And basically the Housing Committee's recommendations are based on the findings of that assessment. And I just wanted to share some of the findings with you and with the rest of the public, so that they know really where we're coming from in terms of recommending housing that is geared towards people at 80%, 60%, 100% of AMI, and potentially seniors. So Irvington's population actually declined between 2000 and 2017. We were one of only 3 villages in the county to have a population decline. Of that decline, the largest percentage, 38.1%, was of people in the age groups of 30 to 44, which is young families, prime earning years, et cetera. The second largest decline was in the age cohort of 75 to 84. So basically somewhat above empty nesters. I mean, obviously empty nesters, but probably empty nesters for a couple of years, suggesting that they really couldn't find a place to live in Irvington where they wanted to remain. On the flip side of that, the largest increase in population by over 100% was in the age group 85 and older. So we clearly have a very large senior population, all of whom are living in housing, which could also be occupied by young families, except that they're occupied by seniors. So Michael, talking about the senior housing potential of some of these properties, if Irvington seniors had a viable choice of a place to live that was, perhaps only for seniors, that could actually free up a considerable number of single family homes, townhomes, whatever, in the community where younger families could move in. Another finding was that Irvington's housing stock is very old. Some of it is charming and old, and some of it is not so charming and old. 64% of it was built before 1960. So that's over 60 years old. Only less than 3% has been built since the year 2000. So that's another issue, because young people, the people who are sort of forming households now and moving to the suburbs, perhaps, are generally millennials. And this is a group that has been saddled with a very large percentage of student loans. And affordability is a very, very important factor for them. Most of them are not really buying homes. Most of them are more interested in renting, and they want to rent new. And Irvington simply does not have that housing stock. It just doesn't exist. So let's see. Another interesting statistic is that the number of people living in poverty in Irvington between 2000 and 2017 rose 86%. So it's a big increase in percentage. It wasn't a huge number of people. It was like 173, but still, in comparison, Dobbs Ferry's percentage of people living in poverty declined by 275%. I have no idea why that is. I have no explanation, but I thought it was an important number to be aware of. And in 2017, when they looked at this, they looked at the affordability gaps for both median price village homes and rentals. So the median sales price in 2017 for a home in Irvington was $1,224,950. The maximum sales price affordable to a household earning 80% of AMI was $240,000. The maximum sale price affordable to a household earning 100% of AMI, and that's area median income, was $300,000. So clearly, you know, a huge, huge gap. For renters, the average, let's see, the fair market rent of a 2-bedroom unit in Irvington was $1,687. The annual wage required to afford that would be $67,480. The hourly wage required would have been $32.44. And yet the hourly renter wage rate in Irvington, and I'm not entirely sure what that is based on, we could find out, but I don't know offhand, was only $15.93. So the monthly gap between what they could afford and what was being asked for a 2-bedroom apartment was $860. You know, so there is a huge gap in terms of what, you know, average people can afford and what is available in Irvington. Of what is available, most of it is very old. And with old comes, you know, structural problems, energy inefficiency, things that add to the costs of maintaining that home. And so as a result, you know, the people, the young families are just not coming here. And I think that's something we really want to change. You know, we want to attract young families. It's better for the downtown, you know, it's better for our merchants, it's better for the schools, you know, and I don't really see how that can be argued with. So another interesting statistic is that of the, let's see, you know, huge number of people who work in Westchester County don't live in Westchester County. I think, where is that? Well, I don't know the numbers offhand, but something in the neighborhood of 200,000 people work in the county, but do not live in the county. And of those, most of them do not live in Manhattan for obvious reasons. So most of them are driving to work, and they're driving alone, adding to traffic congestion, pollution, you know, I mean, everybody really knows what this means. So that also is something that for the community would be wonderful to change. I mean, how many teachers in the Irvington school system live in Irvington? I don't know the answer, but I suspect, and my experience tells me, very few, if any. So these are all factors that have to be considered when we're deciding what we want to see built on those last few big pieces of property. And that's it. Any questions?
So
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Katerina has her hand up, Larry. Hello, Katerina.
Yes, good evening. So I actually, hello, do you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, great, thank you. So I actually sent an email to the board, and instead of you reading my email at the next meeting, I would like to read it myself. And then I also wanted to address a couple of points from the last speaker, but I will read the email first. So I would like to point out that the imposition of yet another multifamily housing on our village will affect single-family homeowners in a very significant way, and not limited to those who own properties at or near North Broadway, where the proposed site is located. In my email, I enclosed some data, which I would like to bring to the board's attention and to show how overtaxing of single-family residences significantly reduces their values, which will undoubtedly result in even higher tax rate in order to fill the budget gap. This is something that has peaked significantly over the last 5 years and was brought on us by Greenberg's reassessment of property values and tremendous difference in taxing single-family residences versus co-ops, condos, and townhouses. So single-family residences are taxed at their property value or from their property value, and co-ops, condos, and townhouses are being taxed from their rental value, which approximately, here I made a mistake in the number. I wrote 34,000 because I thought that the median selling price for the single residence was $1 million. And I've just heard from the speaker that it was actually about $1,225,000, if I recall correctly. So instead of 34,000, that brings us to about 40,000 on average for a single family residence versus for co-op apartments, it's only 1,900 on average. And thus resulted in bringing down property values for single family homeowners. My family would not have purchased the property in Irvington should we have known that our property tax burden would jump more than 35% in just 2 years after the purchase. This surely will not attract any potential buyers. No, they will be attracted by the fact that Irvington has the highest property taxes in Westchester County, and thus in the United States, since Westchester County is known for having the highest property taxes in the country. A few years back, I wrote about this issue to Mayor Smith, predicting that Irvington single-family housing market will be greatly affected by such an increase. And today we are seeing just that. This is despite an ongoing mass exodus from New York City, which drives housing prices up everywhere, but not in Irvington. In Irvington, sellers have been losing a lot of money on the resale. This signals that Irvington has already passed a tipping point and entered a downward spiral where housing prices fall and thus bring down the tax revenue. To collect enough money for our local budget, the village will be forced to tax its residents at the even higher rate and plunge single-family home values even deeper down. Like many other communities near New York City, Irvington has benefited greatly for decades from a short-distance commute to Manhattan. In a post-COVID world, when work from everywhere becomes the new normal, Irvington won't have the same appeal as it used to have for young professionals with children. If you're working from home several days a week, why would you live in the most expensive village outside of New York City? And even if you still work in a city, just 10 minutes longer commute will save you half of the property taxes that you would pay here in Irvington. Needless to mention that the schools which have been continuously falling in their rating from 10 to 6, as assessed by greatschools.com at the very moment. Now, the above is directly related to the conversation on zoning because, as I mentioned before, the tax burden is primarily on single-family homeowners who pay taxes from their property values, while condo, co-op, townhouse owners pay taxes from their rental values. To demonstrate the difference, I will use the data brought to us by another Irvington resident back in December, because this was when I last joined the meeting. So that Irvington resident brought the data about 88 co-op units located at 120 North Broadway. which only generates $167,845 in property taxes for the village, which equals to the amount paid by only 4 single-family residences on average. Here I have to point out that Irvington has hundreds of condo, co-op, townhouse, and other rental units similar to those on North Broadway. But after calculation, about 1,300 units already. Their tax burden for maintaining our village safe, clean, and beautiful is shifted to us, single-family homeowners, for the most part. Even bigger expense are local schools, where Irvington taxpayers spend about $37,000 per year per child. Total pupil population of our village differs from about 1,700 students to about 2,000 students from year to year. About 10% of the entire student population are qualified for financial assistance. Probably even higher percentage of them lives in condos, and their tax burden is shifted to us. And while I am proud that we are helping those in need and boast financial diversity in our village and at our schools, it should be obvious that we simply cannot afford to lose even more money than we already do. Many of us are families with little children, so we have to calculate our expenses carefully. And for the family of first-generation immigrants who never had it easy to begin with, it would be simply unfair. I'm obviously talking about my family. Bottom line is that Irvington is already doing its part in maintaining more financial diversity than we can afford. Allowing even more affordable housing than Irvington already boasts will send already overtaxed single-family housing market into even deeper and rapid decline. It is also worth mentioning that Irvington does not have sufficient number of businesses that would ease our tax burden, and thus cannot be compared to other Westchester municipalities that do. So I created a list of properties that were sold within the last year, just to show that they were sold at a loss. I'm not going to go over entire list. Those who are interested would be able to read my email as it will be attached to the next agenda, but I will mention just a few of them. 62 Arsley Avenue West. It was sold back in 2014 for $2,650,000. It was sold again just past September for $2,080,000, resulting in almost $600,000 loss, not including the broker's fees. 63 Hamden Lane, sold in 2006 for $2,100,000. It was sold again this past September for $1,825,000, resulting $225,000 in loss, again, not including the broker's fees. 5 Manor Pond, sold in 2005 for $2,550,000 and paid taxes from $2,591,000. It was sold again this year for $2,095,000, resulting in almost $500,000 loss, not including the other expenses. 1 Belmont Drive, it's a large mansion, more than 6,000 square feet on almost 2 acres lot in the heart of Arsley Park, which is a very desirable location. It was sold this year for only $1,950,000. In 2017, it was assessed for taxing purposes at $2,921,300, which is almost $1 million more than its selling price. But obviously, it's not only millionaires that are losing the money. So I will go to the smaller and less expensive properties. 13 Richmond Hill. Slightly more than 2,000 square feet house, which was sold in March of this year for only $705,000. It was assessed and taxed from $826,000. So $121 difference. 15 Sycamore Lane, 2,861 square feet house, sold last December for $912,000. It was assessed and taxed from $1,135,000. So it was actually sold with a difference of $223,000. Current prices were unheard of when I was buying my property in 2014. And Greenberg's valuations are correct for the most part. However, extremely high property taxes are just killing the values of our homes, resulting in tremendous losses for the families that own them. Currently, it would be fair to say that if you live and pay property taxes on a $3 million mansion, you can lose up to $1 million at resale. If you live in a single family home purchased and valued at $1 million, you can expect to lose about $200,000. Everyone else would lose something in between or somewhat below. And I would like to remind again to the board that we are in the midst of mass exodus from New York City, which drives up the prices everywhere, but not in Irvington. If we want to maintain the quality of our schools and services, we need a more balanced distribution of the tax burden, spreading it proportionally among all taxpayers. This is the problem Irvington Village representatives should be trying to fix, not to impose even more affordable housing, and thus burdening the taxpayers to even greater extent. If we do not understand the challenge our community faces today, we will all lose in the long term, from the wealthy neighbor that sells their house at a big loss, to the families on financial assistance that will see how over the time a decaying tax base progressively lowers funding for our schools and services, deteriorating such services and causing a downward spiral for all. I would also ask Irvington residents who share my concerns to speak up. The future of our community depends on the actions we take today. Also, after I wrote this email, I learned that Hudson House Co-op has reached a settlement, reducing its tax assessment by about 1/4. And this is yet another proof of badly changed housing market here in Irvington. So going back to the previous speaker, I hope that she now understands the answer to her question why young families are not moving to Irvington. Because I am a young family, I have 3 young children to support. And another thing that I wanted to address, I think it was an incorrect statement that people who commute to New York City are just adding to their emission. Absolutely not. The reason we moved here because we like the closeness of Metro North, and I personally love that Irvington has 2 metro stations. So everyone who commutes, they just take the train. It makes no sense to be stuck in traffic, but take an enjoyable train ride instead. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Katerina, and thank you for your email. I didn't know if before I read some of the the longer multi-signed, I think it was up to 48 signatures. If maybe Peter Budieri or there he is. Peter, I didn't know if you wanted to maybe present that. Now you have your hand up, so I assume you do.
Yes, I'm happy to summarize it.
Great.
I wonder if I could start briefly by understanding Village Attorney Sesich's exception to one of the statistics in there regarding number of units per lot area. So Maxon, both the Maxon site in the letter was given in terms of unit per gross site area, and those 3 garden apartment complexes were also given in terms of units per site area. And it was a comparison of apples and apples. At Maxon had 16.7 units per acre. Half Moon, Woodbrook, and Cedar Hill had 13.5, 12.4, and 12.7 units per acre. So it's an accurate comparison. I'm not sure I understood Ms. Desich's exception.
No, all I was saying was that the board, we don't use units per acre in when we're calculating how many units you can have. You use a density factor, and the board came up with the density factor, and the density factor was equivalent to those. And the density factor is based on net site area.
Okay, so anyway, but in terms of reality, in terms of what you see on the sites and, the number of people in a given area, the comparisons in the letter are accurate. Okay. So let me just summarize the points of the letter. I'll try to be brief. I guess the first point is that this zoning proposal departs fundamentally from what zoning has always done in the past and what our zoning law was based on, which is basically to improve the livability of the community in some very concrete ways in terms of providing a tax base, providing privacy, reducing traffic congestion, and improving the appearance of the built environment. And this resolution not only is going into a complete different area of trying to, this amendment is trying to affect social change as far as I can understand it, this talk about diversity. So it's departing from the usual zoning objectives, but it's actually it's doing harm to the village in the terms of those objectives. So I just asking the trustees, I'm shining a light on that and asking the trustees to recognize that and consider that.
I don't think I necessarily would agree with that assessment. To me, we have properties that are being used as office buildings, and we don't think that they're going to be used for office buildings forever. So they would be potentially derelict, and we would like to see them be viable properties. And, they're large properties. So we thought that multifamily housing is a need here. And, affordable housing is a need here. So, I think we view differently having some affordable housing, some additional affordable housing with, a more diverse stock of housing would be negative to the village. And to me, it does help with the tax base, because if we have abandoned buildings or only religious uses from these properties, which are really the only thing that I've really been interested in purchasing them in the last 10 years, it's not going to help the village's tax base either. So I actually see this as kind of almost a revitalization plan for the area, as well as adding to multifamily housing. So I think we just disagree on what's good for the village and what's not. I think important for me was not having it be too large, and keeping the setback, so you have that kind of open feeling as you come into the village from the north. But that's obviously, those are all subjective opinions, and we obviously differ. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Peter. I just wanted to make that.
Well, okay, I appreciate that, but at the risk of being a tiny bit argumentative, I wanted to get away from those subjective opinions of what is good for the village or what is bad for the village, and reduce it and return to more objective measures such as traffic, density, tax base. So I'll just leave that one that way, that way at this point.
And I also think, frankly, without a national proposal in front of us, it's very hard to assess any of those things you just talked about. Something like the DiNardo property would add greatly to the tax base, and that's quasi multifamily. So I think it's to me, I could make a best case scenario that this would be a huge boon to the tax base, and I'm sure you can make a worst case scenario that it would be terrible to the tax base. So I think that it's kind of hard to be super objective right now with numbers if we don't have actual plans in front of us. But that's why we have to be a little bit subjective here, I believe.
Well, all right, let me return to that when I get to the tax part of the letter. So I do make it through the letter and summarize it. So the second point was just basically about the MFO amendment harming the small town open space character of the village. And that's where I speak about the huge size of this project. I mean, this is a mammoth. I can't think of any words to say other than it's a hulking eyesore right up there on the top of the hill overlooking the entrance to the village, the northern entrance to the village. It's way out of scale. to anything that's around.
You're talking about
it.
the potential for a maximum build out is what you're.
Correct. Yes, that's right. So that and the density, the number of units per acre and so on. So that's my point there. And I do quote County Executive Latimer, who said, in terms of providing affordable housing, that the county, I mean, he is its executive, would not want to build a building that is out of scale with its surroundings. In his quotation, we are not looking to see a project built, a building built in an immediate area that doesn't look like it belongs there in size, scope, or design. So that's the second major point of the letter. The third point really has to do with this idea of diversity. And I think this is a key point, because with all the people talking about how we should be more diverse and more income diverse, and some people are talking about racially diverse, I thought, well, how diverse are we? And in fact, just counting the building complexes that I'm aware of, mainly the garden apartments and, the large complexes, the townhouse, Field Point, Downingwood, Pennybridge Manor, and Hudson House, you find that there's a very good estimate that about 30% of the units in Irvington are actually affordable to 80% AMI people. So those are a fair, if they are for purchase, to the extent that they're for purchase, those fall under our fair and affordable guidelines. And another 20% are within our moderate income guidelines. So it seems to me that the board should have a goal. If they feel that we're not adequately economically diverse, what is the goal? Do they think that Irvington should be 50%, fair and affordable, and another 25%? It seems that we really should be going to some norms or goals. And I wonder whether, I haven't found any data, but I wonder whether you have any data as to what the norm is in other towns with comparable average incomes to Irvington, because it seems to me from that data that we are extremely economically diverse in terms of the housing stock and affordable. So that's the third point. The fourth and fifth points, I think the board has been dealing with and is aware of. The traffic congestion has been discussed quite a bit. I appreciate Trustee Gilliland's remark on several occasions, assuming I understood it correctly, that the traffic requirements are such that you could develop one site and then you wouldn't have enough room to develop the other site. So I find that to be a real issue when we're talking about 167 or 213 units where we previously were going to have 8. In terms of the school budgets, that point is really a request to the board to come up with some actual numbers based on real scenarios of more students, rather than just a qualitative statement from the school board superintendent that we can accommodate 200 more students. Yes, we can accommodate 100 more or 200 more, but there are going to be more teachers, there are going to be more expenses, more other personnel, I assume. Every time when we asked to vote for a school budget, it said, well, if we don't vote for the school budget, the class sizes are going to go up by 3 people. And that's something we want to avoid. So the letter just really requests that a quantitative analysis of what the real results are likely to be, in light of the fact also that one would expect that if you're building brand new housing, you're going to have new people, as Ms. Flock said, young couples, young people with families coming in. And then I think the final point about the tax base, yes, it's true what you say. If a church builds the property, it's going to go off the tax rolls. But you are also denying those properties the highest and best use if in case that use is single family housing. And just a quick analysis, which I welcome you're telling me that I'm dead wrong if I am in this letter. It appears that single family houses on 1 acre lots, which is what it's zoned for now, would provide potentially twice as much taxes as the land yields now, whereas at the worst case scenario of comparing it with some of the garden apartments, a multifamily development could actually reduce that, the taxes that come out of that. And I don't think that $360,000 of taxes is a negligible amount of money. That's the opportunity loss, the apparent opportunity loss if these numbers are correct, resulting from not allowing single family development. And in that regard, again, I'm simply asking the board to really quantify that, to project it and to make some estimates and to quantify it and to take it into consideration, because that's serious money for the village. I think that covers it. I think that summarizes the letter and all those exhibits in it.
Great. Well, I appreciate you summarizing it, and we appreciate you putting together those thoughts for our consideration and additional analysis.
Thank you.
I just muted myself. I don't know if anyone else wanted to speak. Otherwise, I'll go back and review the letters. I think Peter Bernstein's not here. I know he wrote a letter. So I pulled that up. If anybody, there we go. Joy would like to speak again.
Brian, I just wanted to ask Deb Flock about, after summarizing the issue of seniors and young families, which she pointed out the housing data that she was analyzing, was there a recommendation from the housing committee that one or those other, that the senior housing discussion that we've been having and the possible inclusion in the law to support that, is that something that the housing committee thinks perhaps we should be dropping or not?
Ooh, I'm not sure I can speak for the whole housing committee on this, because I don't think we've discussed that specifically, but it has not come up to my recollection that anyone has raised the issue of dropping that.
Okay.
So I would say a qualified no. I don't think that it should be dropped at this point.
Right. Because you spoke both about the needs of seniors and the needs of young families. And I guess I was just trying to get a sense if there was, that was balanced out in terms of, I mean, I've always felt there's needs of both those areas. I think when the comprehensive plan was redone, that I think, if I recall, both of those needs were discussed as a housing need. So anyway.
And clearly the numbers support that. There's a huge need there was a huge decline in the not hugely, the moderately seniors and in young people. So I think those people were leaving, but then there's also a huge number of what they call the frail elderly, or 85 and older, who maybe feel they can't move at this point because for whatever reason. But perhaps if there was housing that was specifically suitable for them in Irvington, they would consider moving. And in that case, their housing units would become available to potentially young families. I also just wanted to say something about the taxing levels and the various types of properties, and that is townhouses and single-family attached homes, such as Richmond Hill. Those are taxed at the same rate as single-family homes. So whereas condominiums and co-ops are taxed at lower levels. And I really don't know what rental apartment complexes are taxed at. And most of, or at least several of the attached townhome type developments in Irvington are in fact single family attached and are taxed as if they were single family. So they contribute just as much to the tax base. But yes, there is a huge diversion between condominium tax rates and single family tax rates, which is a different problem for a different group, I think, but it's a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joy, and then Michael and Peter.
Joy had her hand up, now she's not on top. Let me bring her on to talk. There you go.
Okay. I want to enlighten the last speaker about why young people are not moving to Irvington and why old people are not moving out of Irvington. My daughter and my son-in-law both grew up in Irvington. And when it was time for them to buy a house, immediately they said, we are not paying those taxes, and moved to White Plains. I can tell you almost all their friends say the same thing. People moving from the city say, we are not paying those taxes, and they don't even consider looking at Irvington. I work with veterans, finding veterans houses. The number one thing veterans tell me, they don't want to pay taxes over $15,000. Good luck in Irvington. So the reason people aren't moving here is because we were reassessed, chased a lot of people out that were in affordable housing in the village. And young people are savvy. They don't think the schools are worth it. And they look at White Plains sales numbers, folks, and that will tell you the story. That's where the young people are moving, is White Plains, New Rochelle, even Mount Vernon. Young people are moving places where the taxes are less than $15,000 on an average house. Why are old people not moving? Because they can't sell their houses because nobody wants to pay the taxes. You can talk to anybody and look at the real numbers. Talk to anybody who's in the real estate business and they will tell you those 30-somethings are not moving to Irvington for one reason, and that is the taxes. So building more places at high tax rates isn't going to help you at all.
Thank you, Joy. Michael Hanna, then Peter.
Great. Yeah, I just wanted to add into the various theories about the choices people are making. As someone who's been very involved in the Half Moon co-ops, you know, what I observe year in, year out are that you know, certainly there are a lot of wonderful long-term residents here, and then in terms of people purchasing, we see folks who are making that choice to downsize and selling a single-family home and moving into a co-op, and so those tend to be older residents. And then what we see also are younger families, you know, that maybe have their first child on the way, who are purchasing at you know, the Half Moon co-op. And a few years down the way, as their you know, situation improves, as they've gained some equity and their work may be improving, are purchasing other homes within the community. And I also see it with other families within the community that you know, as they build equity with a smaller home, that they often, you know, there's any number of families we can point to who have purchased other homes within the community. So to the point that is being made about supporting the idea of the senior housing provision, I would suggest, in fact, that having the housing open to younger families is just as important, because that gives them an entree point into Irvington as they, build their means and assets.
Thank you, Michael. Peter back.
Hi. I just wanted to address the tax issues that Ms. Flock was making in her last comment regarding townhouses and condos. So, because I did a lot of research, which is in a lot of the exhibits in the letter that 48 of us signed. And the real distinction is not between townhomes as a building type and single family. It's between those that are organized as condos and those that are not. So in Downingwood, Pennybridge Manor, and Field Point, which are all organized as condos, those tax rates, whether for townhomes or for single families in the case of detached single families in the case of Field Point, are substantially lower than Richmond Hill, even if Richmond Hill is a development of attached units, where you'll have the condos in the range of less than $10,000, $8,000 to $10,000, whereas Richmond Hill is up in the $25,000 to $30,000 range. That's what I found from a good deal of research. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and read Peter Bernstein's letter. See if anybody else wants to speak up before then, but actually, we didn't hear from Cuddy and Fetter yet either, but Peter's is short, so I'll start with that. As you continue to consider North Broadway zoning changes, we urge you to focus on this opportunity to proactively address racial segregation. The attached 2012 article by Nicole Hannah-Jones offers an interesting perspective on the failure of HUD and Westchester to remove the market obstacles to integration. There's a link. Ms. Hannah-Jones is a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter covering racial injustice for the New York Times Magazine and the creator of Landmark 1619 Project. As you know, we object strongly to zoning incentives that will increase density in order to increase profits for projects that will provide 10% or less affordable units. The North Broadway zoning should include incentives that will make the properties more attractive to developers that will build meaningful number of affordable housing units. Determine what zoning changes should be adopted to meaningfully increase the economic and racial diversity of Irvington. The board should be asking that question rather than asking for a wish list from market value developers. Thanks for your service to the village, Peter and Bernstein and Sarah Cox. No one else raised their hand. I don't know if anybody's on from Cuddy Fetter. Or is this an older letter, Larry? We just got, I think you said we also just got a new letter. So I don't know if they had anything they wanted to, I think Dave Smith's here, but he's an offshoot of Cuddy Fetter. There we go. Rebecca.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was on mute. I was going to say Rebecca Volk is from Cuddy.
Yes, thank you, board members. I was just going to say we submitted a letter today that we didn't have any comments yet at this time prepared in response to the most recent draft dated January 15th. We intend to submit that to you in advance of your meeting of February 1st. We just wanted the board to be on notice of that.
Okay, perfect. Nice and short. I like it.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Me too. So can I assume that Deb's comments kind of covered the letter from the Irvington Housing Committee? I'll give her a minute here to tell me I'm incorrect, but we've obviously read it. It's posted, but if so, I don't see anyone else's hand up. We're obviously not voting tonight. There's still a lot of work to be done. So we will keep the public hearing open and we will, Deborah Flock. I missed something.
I apologize, but no, actually what I presented tonight was not what was necessarily in the letter, only because I did not feel that I should be rereading the letter, which had already been sent to you, but we made several other points in the letter. So if you wish to read it, you could.
Okay.
Sorry.
Are there any particular ones you want me to highlight, or do you want me to read the entire thing? Just because I feel like we've gotten a lot of information already tonight, but I can, let's see here. I can go ahead. Let's see here. As the board knows, the Irvington Housing Committee has stated its general support for the MFO rezoning on North Broadway, and the board is in the process of drafting. This MFO rezoning is consistent with the recommended goals and action plan in the 2018 comprehensive plan update, and is consistent with the original goals of the 2003 comprehensive plan, which the 2018 plan update is based. Continue to remain steadfast in our support of the board's thoughtful, considerate approach to the rezoning process. They'd like to respond to the January 15th, 2012 letter to the board that was signed by 11 Irvington residents regarding the rezoning. MFO, now let's kind of read these. MFO departs from the original purpose of the Irvington zoning law, which is to act in long-form interest of Irvington and its residents. We suggest that, contrary to what the letter argues, there's nothing in Article 1, purpose, Section 2224.1 of the Irvington zoning code that suggests it is not in the long-term best interest of Irvington residents to have a town which accurately reflects the world in which we live. We suggest that long-term interest of Irvington and its residents would include ensuring that the community increases its racial and economic diversity, and expanding opportunities for young families or retired seniors to find housing in our community. The next point was the development would do harm to the small town open space character that make Irvington a unique and desirable place it is to live, play, and work. This is the response. We share the goal of maintaining a small town open space character that makes Irvington a wonderful place to live. We would suggest, however, that the proposed rezoning, which has amongst its provisions generous setbacks, mass and height restrictions, and preservation of stone walls along Broadway, not alter the character of the village or make it a less desirable place in which to live, work, or play. Their next point that from the letter was Irvington already has a diverse housing stock that is affordable to economically diverse residents. The response is, while it is true that there is some diversity in Irvington's housing stock, many of the garden apartment complexes cited in the letter were built between 50 and 70 years ago. Even recognizing the positive and valuable contributions these developments play in our community, the village's 2003 comprehensive plan specifically called out for increasing the amount of affordable and below market rate housing in our community. We would suggest that these goals remain important today and desirable to see more diversity in the housing stock and in the economic diversity of Irvington residents. Next point was MFO could make traffic congestion on North Broadway worse than it already is. Response, we recognize this is a valid concern, but the current MFO zoning proposal directly addresses the issue. So proposed amendments and they're referenced. Moreover, we would suggest it's unlikely that all vehicles from all units that might be built would be entering Broadway at rush hour. In addition to this, work and traffic patterns in the post-pandemic world of work may be different in the past, which would alleviate many of the current and future traffic concerns on North Broadway. The next point was MFO could require increases in the school budget without bringing in adequate additional taxes to pay for them. The response is the opposite is more likely to be true, as marginal additions of students at each grade level would bring down the per student cost of the district. The school system is currently 250 to 300 students below the district's current capacity. A strange credulity that as a result of any potential development, there would be so many students entering the school system at one time and at one grade level to require one or more additional teachers to be hired. The next point was MFO could harm our tax base. The answer, the current analysis that outlines a decrease in property taxes resulting from development is predicated on the development of co-ops, not condos. However, it is highly probable that a developer would build co-ops and condos are taxed at a higher level. It should be noted that even if the worst case scenario would come to pass, the developer builds co-ops, the net burden of each Irvington resident based on the figures would be around $8. I think that's it. I don't think I missed. I think I got those. It was kind of the point for point. I think you're right. You did not address all of those. So great. Well, I don't see any other hands up. So I am going to go ahead and move forward now. The next item is authorizing a tax certiorari for Hudson House Tenants Corp. But there's a question. Could you please clarify if under the proposed zoning, someone could still buy the Maxim property or the smaller HSA property and simply use the existing homes as a one-family residence? Thanks. Do you know the answer to that off the top of your head, Marianne?
The small, well, it's if they're used as single-family houses now, probably not on the Maxon property. I mean, if a use is there already, it can be continued. It would be a prior non-conforming use. But I don't believe that the house on the Maxon property is used as a single-family house. So no.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm not sure how the I don't know about the one on HSA. Do you, Larry? Do you know about that building? Yeah, I don't know how it's used. If it's used as a single family house, it can continue to be used as a single family house. If it's used as offices, no.
Okay. Thanks for that. Let me flip forward here. I no longer print off everything. Just have to get to,
Very close to the end.
there we are. I don't know if anyone has any questions on this. Otherwise, I will go ahead and read. Whereas petitions have been filed by Hudson House Tenants Corp. challenging real property tax assessments on the Village of Irvington and the Town of Greenberg's assessment rolls with respect to the subject property for 2018 to 2020 tax years. With respect to parcel designated section 2, spot 160, block 69 and 70, lots 9, 1 SI and SDF. Property owner Hudson House Tenants Corp. Property description 123 Main Street, years 2018 to 2020.
I'm sorry, that's a typo actually. It's
Yeah,
Hudson
that's-
House Tenants Corp. Yeah, that's Hudson Road West.
I was going to say, it doesn't seem like the right address to me, but what do I know?
Yeah, apologies.
But anyway, I'll continue on. Whereas petitioner's actions are now pending in the Supreme Court, Westchester County, and whereas the town and petitioner have reached a mutually agreeable resolution, now therefore the village is authorized to effectuate a settlement commensurate with the following terms. Assessment year 2018, original assessment $19,057,600 down to $572,400, reduction of $4,485,200. For 2019, $19,057,600 to $14,922,400 for reduction of $4,135,200. And in 2020, the assessment of $16,988,600 down to $15,422,400, reduction of $1,566,200. The Village of Irvington share of the refund is $79,632.72. I will make a motion to authorize the tax certiorari settlement, if I can get a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You guys still here? All right, perfect. Next up are volunteer appointments to the planning board. We are happy that we've had several people, and we're still interviewing some people, but we went from kind of having a little bit of a shortage of planning board candidates and members to actually having now, after tonight, 2 alternates, which is great, which we haven't had in, I think, about a year. So, and thanks to the board for interviewing several of the candidates as well. But without further ado, resolve to appoint Lori Davidovitz as the first alternate of the planning board with the term to expire December 2023. And further resolve to appoint Michael Bifulco as the second alternate to the planning board with the term to expire December 2021. I'll make the motion if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And unfortunately, Brenda is under the weather. So Larry's going to run point on the budget workshop, which is, I think, officially kicking off our budget season, Larry.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, you get the backup treasurer. So what I'd like to do is just give an overview of what we see at this point. We haven't been presented with any departmental budgets yet, but there are lots of moving parts that could be considered to give you an idea of where we are in terms of this upcoming year's budget. So, you know, at this point, first item to touch on is assessed valuations. Actually came up during the public hearing, so maybe it's a little bit pertinent. There is a decrease in assessed valuations. It's one of the first times since the revaluation that there is a decline in our assessed valuation. The value the initial value is about an $8 million decrease. But there are also some pending outstanding items, which could be as much as $6 million, but we're assuming about half of that. So about a total of $11 million decline. That decline in the assessment roll would cut, would be equivalent to about $87,000 of expenditures of budget. It would increase the tax rate just on its own, just under 0.6%. So that's the impact of assessments. So that's obviously working working against us. From a tax certiorari standpoint, you just approved one, but we continue dealing with some certiorari's, not a tremendous amount. They're being, discussed and settled in a fairly orderly fashion. We have a budget every year of about $150,000. This past year, we haven't used it all yet. So the upcoming year, we expect 150,000 to also be enough, adequate for next year. From a salary standpoint, we've made assumptions. We do have a contract in place for the CSEA. We do not have a contract in place for the police department, so we've made certain assumptions in the budget for that. But the CSEA carries with it a 2% salary increase for the upcoming fiscal year. Health insurance, is actually an interesting story. Usually this is an 8 to 10% increase annually. I mean, that's been the going rate. This past year, 2020, there was no increase in our health insurance rate. And this 2021, there was a 3% increase, which is much lower than trend. So because of that, for the upcoming year, our budget projection for health insurance is actually being lowered by $200,000. And that accounts for an anticipated.
You should have saved that for Brenda because it's such an outlier.
This is all Brenda. I take no credit for this. We are accounting for an assumed increase in 2022, which is in the middle of our fiscal year. But we are only projecting a 5% increase for next year, so we'll see if that holds. And this also accounts for known retirements, which increases the number of lives that we're insuring on our health insurance. So we are factoring that in. And even then, it looks like a decrease of 200,000. Just a note, in case you're interested, how much a family policy costs these days. It's about $30,000 a year. So it's not an insignificant number. Other insurance, both regular liability and such, as well as our workers' compensation insurance, we're projecting a 3% increase, not anything that we expect drastic there, but we don't have any really preliminary numbers on that. But the numbers in our budget that we'll talk about do include that as a factor. Retirement costs are interesting. So our retirement rate, the amount we pay in, the percentage of salary that we pay in to fund the retirement plan is calculated based upon, of course, a lot of factors, but one of the factors is the size and performance of the New York State Common Retirement Fund. So I'm sure you've heard in the past, for those that have been on the board for a while, that when there's significant declines in the stock market, depending on when those declines take place, that can directly impact what our contribution rate is. It is based upon an average over the past 3 years in terms of values and returns of the Common Retirement Fund. But the most recent year was valued on April 1st, 2020. And so there was a significant decline at that moment. Now it has since recovered and then some, but that valuation date is in the law, so there's no changing that. So that has increased our contribution rates fairly significantly for all of our employees. So for example, for our regular non-police employees, we'll be contributing 18.1% of our salaries instead of 16.1. For the police, we'll be contributing 30.4% of salary instead of 25.6%. Those are pretty significant increases. That leads to about $225,000 of added pension costs for the upcoming year. So we give it and we take it away. On the revenue front, not really talking too much about departmental revenues. We'll get into that as we go through our budgets with our departments, but some of the larger items that we deal with, like mortgage tax and sales tax, I'll touch on. So for mortgage tax last year, as you remember, you were developing your budget and adopting it pretty much right at the early stages of the pandemic and the associated economic crisis at that time. And you did decide to reduce your mortgage tax down by $50,000, your budget. So it does not look like that's necessary. We may be able to reinstate that. We still have to see some final numbers, but the mortgage market was quite vigorous since then. But again, that's hindsight, of course. So we will take a look at that. There might be some relief there. Sales tax, last year you did not do any sort of decrease in the budget process, and it looks like that was a wise move, and it looks like it can remain at the level it is. So there's no positive impact or negative impact there, but that's a big number that can swing in different directions depending on the state of the economy. From a debt service standpoint, there is, you continue to adopt capital budgets and the associated. So of course there are new borrowings associated with last year, but we also are benefiting from the entire payoff of a 2006 bond. And that essentially eliminated about $660,000 of payments from last year to from the current year to next year. So there's a few moving parts, which I don't have schedules. I'm not going to pull schedules out to show you, but the result of the moving parts is that there's a decrease in debt service from last year, from the current year to next year, of over $400,000. Now, not all of that is in the general fund. Some of that does belong to the water fund, the benefit. So, that's obviously a factor working in our favor. Let's see if I may end up pulling up a schedule here, because I would like to talk about the tax cap. I know we touch on that every year. Just give me a second here. Let's see here. I just want to give you a picture of where we are cap-wise, how much room we have, so to speak. Okay. All right. So I don't expect you to read all this, but I'll just quickly outline that the numbers in green here have been confirmed. The numbers in yellow are essentially the allowable tax levy that particular line item adds to the cap. So, the growth factor, so this what we used to call a 2% cap, so it's a 2% or less. The cap for the upcoming year is just a hair over 1%, and that's based upon the CPI for the previous year. CPI being very under control, so to speak, inflation-wise. There are other factors here. There's a growth factor, which is a measure of new construction, new assessables on our roll. New construction theoretically leads to new people, which is not really in fact the case, but the theory is that we would be allowed to increase our tax cap to account for the new building that's going on. we talk about this every year, and I know that it doesn't sound logical, but we're following the formula, and that's the number. So it doesn't seem to apply exactly the way they intended to Irvington, but that's the number.
That's the number they just give us, correct?
Yeah, that number, that comes from data that's filed with the state by the town of Greenberg, the assessing unit. So, again, we don't calculate that. We did have carry forward levy from last year. We did not exceed the tax cap last year. In fact, I don't believe there was any increase last year. And so we are allowed to carry a portion of that forward to the cap. So the tax cap there's also an exclusion for the excess pension costs because of the large increase in pension. And all of that adds up to a tax levy cap that would allow you, and by the way, I'm just telling you what the allowable numbers are. You obviously have to figure out, what number you get to, but the allowable cap, the allowable increase in tax levy would be $649,000, almost $650,000, which is a pretty big number. Where that fits into the things that I outlined before, let me bring up a different schedule here. So can you see a schedule here, the budget line item details?
Yes.
Okay, so taking all of those moving parts that I just outlined and dropping that into our tax levy calculation would result in a decrease of the tax levy of about 2%, almost 2%. Again, I think that accounts for the decrease in assessables. But as you heard, there were a few positives, which is health insurance and debt service. A couple of negatives as well, but overall it's a positive. Now, this is before any discussions with departments about any costs that they may discuss, any revenue changes. But this is a starting point going into the budget process. So this is a good number in terms of entering in into the budget process.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a good start. Right.
Great.
All right. So it's been a while since I've been a treasurer, but I think I got the point across.
Yeah. Well, it definitely wasn't the presenting the budget that made Brenda not feel well tonight, because it's a good place.
No, not at all. No.
Great. Well,
all right.
I know we're going to have a lot more sessions. If there's any questions now, I'm sure Larry would be happy to answer them. Otherwise, we have many sessions ahead of us. So.
Yeah, we have a schedule outlining when the departments will be ready, and we'll bring them to you each meeting coming up.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Larry, and thanks, Brenda. I hope you feel better.
All to Brenda. She did all that work, obviously.
Reports of board, standing committees, and officers, trustee liaison reports. Mark?
Nothing to add at this moment.
Larry?
Not really. I would just mention that the rec department's under a lot of stress these last few weeks in terms of manpower. I'm not sure if there's an effect on their ongoing senior citizen delivery project. I think they're trying to get it done, but it may be somewhat reduced.
I think there will be a pause next week. They need to dial it back a little bit. There's been a few illnesses in the department, and they just need to lie low for a little bit, try to catch up.
Great.
And that's all I've got.
Connie?
Greg Allen, our theater manager, did want everyone to know that they are continuing with the virtual theater, but they've changed the format a bit. So you don't buy a ticket for a particular night. you have 48 hours to watch whatever it is. And there are two interesting programs that they brought back. One is the very successful concert of Linda Ronstadt music that was a couple of years ago. So you can see that again. And the other one is the film. It was a short film that Greg and Greg and Larry and Lori Chuck had created, and it's in honor of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. So those are the two things that are available virtually from the theater. And that's my report.
And Janice.
From the schools, we had noted that there were some additions from school personnel to the police planning committee that would include the high school and middle school principals, as well as Superintendent Harrison. There's a comment as we consider the zoning issue, just to remind us that there is not a huge capacity for a lot more students in the school district. And I know we've been monitoring that. At the 126 BOE meeting, there will be a presentation on the Enslaved African Monument Initiative and a roundtable discussion on feedback. Annual budget process starts on 2/9 and runs through April at each board meeting. And this is going to be a very trying budget year due to state funding reductions that without intervention from Albany and Washington could be a really dire need, while there's more needs than ever are surfacing as a result of the pandemic and its effects on student learning. With the library, two programs of note coming up. One of it's about the immune system from wellness advocate Dr. Cedric Bacheteau on Saturday, the 23rd at 6:30, and a virtual trip to the Jackson Pollock and Lee Krasner House in studio on Thursday, 1/28 at 2. Register for both on the library website. And there will not be item pickup service on Saturday due to staffing issues caused by staff quarantining due to COVID-19. We should be back to our regular hours the following week. And finally from the fire department, the capital budget has been submitted, and they are closely watching COVID, as we have had a few members struck with it. I wanted to end with some good news from the fire department, that a number of members have already received their first dose of the vaccine. And while it cannot be required, we are encouraging members to get it, and they are abiding by this request. That's all I have.
Great. The combined village administrator clerk treasurer's report.
There you go. So, as you know, the police policy review committee has been meeting very regularly. We've had some pretty good meetings, lots of active participation. They are in the final stages of sending out a survey to the community. We'll obviously push it electronically. It'll be an online survey, but we will also follow up with a postcard inviting people to respond. And for those that choose not to do it online, we can mail a survey, but we'll try to get as much information as we can. It's not a scientifically created survey. We don't have the time for that. But I think, whatever information we can get from it will be more than we have today. So I think that's the approach. Also, there's a presentation tomorrow evening, 4:30, will be a virtual presentation called ABLE, Project ABLE, which is active bystandership for law enforcement. And it's an initiative to try to prevent misconduct and mistakes within police departments. But it's a means of having co-workers in police departments have the ability to speak up when something's done wrong, as opposed to sweeping it under the rug, so to speak.
Larry and I both attended a previous presentation, and it was really interesting. It's basically empowering, subordinates, and there's that whole crazy hierarchy that if your sergeant who's been around 20 years and you've been there for 20 weeks and he does something wrong, how do you empower that 20-week guy to speak up and say, you shouldn't have done that, or stop doing that, or whatever? So, not to interrupt, Larry, but
that's
It's a really,
No.
interesting, it started in New Orleans, I believe, after Katrina. And now they've adopted it in, I don't know, 100 police departments, including, I think Yonkers is coming online now. They're thinking about doing it for Westchester County. So, you know, it's a very interesting program. I think it's 8 hours of training, I think, per officer, something like
I
that.
think so, yeah. And I think there is, it actually has corporate funding behind it to
Yeah, I
to
think
support
MasterCard
the effort.
or,
Yeah. So
I mean,
it's
it's
quite
no- it's no-
interesting.
yeah, it's no out-of-pocket cost, only the time.
Yeah. Yep.
Sorry to
So
interrupt.
interesting. And so we'll have a presentation tomorrow on that. It'll be live streamed, probably 4:30 to 6:30 roughly, but also archived on our YouTube channel. So it'll be an interesting presentation. That's it.
Sorry to interrupt.
Not at all. I'm done.
Village Attorney's report.
No, I don't have a report, Brian.
Any public comments from the final five, including 2 Karen Chazzles? Looks like no. So review of action items, Larry.
I don't think I had any.
Brenda to get well.
Yeah, exactly.
I will, and all the folks in the rec department as well that are sick. Hopefully by the time we have our next meeting in a couple of weeks, everyone's back and healthy. So, that being said, I will make a motion to adjourn if I can get a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. Looks like we can go home.
Bye, everyone.
All righty. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.